Good evening, UK Crime Book Club. It is Tuesday, the 14th of November, and I've been really looking forward to chatting to James Ellson about Cold Summer. So, James, show off your book covers for the Castle series so far and tell us a little bit
Um,
about Cold Summer.
okay, thanks, Sam. So first in the series, The Trail, a missing person inquiry set in Nepal, which I know really well because I've done a lot of climbing out there. And protagonist, obviously, Rick Castle, DCI, and he's a beekeeper because they say write what you know, and I keep bees. Sequel, Cold Dawn, sees Rick go back to Nepal to to pick up on unfinished business from the first one,
I was
and
wondering how you
to
were going to word that.
yeah. So essentially, he's on the hunt for one of the FBI's most wanted in that one. And then, hot off the press, I'm so pleased about this. This is Cold Summer, number 3 in the series, and it's also the third part in the Nepal trilogy. So this one is set in Manchester. So whereas the first two were partly set in Nepal, this one is set in Manchester, but it is some of the same characters from the first two. And this one really is, well, as it says on the back, nothing will be the same again. So this one is a race against time as DCI Castle hunts for 2 wanted suspects trying to kill each other. So that's the series so far.
Absolutely love the series. We've got so much to talk about, and I'm also very aware of not wanting to spoil anything
Hmm.
because I do think I would read it in order. I think you could get away with not reading it in order, but there would be some spoilers.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's from the writing point of view, each one is a standalone and can be read by
Yeah.
themselves. But of course, like with any series, particularly crime fiction, they do build. And, with very long series, 15, 20, 25 book series,
Mm.
after a while, the plot's kind of, you can't remember the plot from the third or the fourth one or whatever. What you can remember is the protagonist and his story or her story. So, in this one, there are significant advantages from reading them in order because the characters develop.
Mm.
And yeah,
And it's really nice to see how they develop as well, because you've got obviously Rick Castle, main character. You've really worked on him, and there is significant growth for Rick in each book, but also as an arc. So you can have you had has he developed in the way that you imagined he would develop, or have some things happened as you've written and you've gone, oh, kind of didn't realize I was going to take it in that direction, but I'm enjoying it.
it's one of the real pleasures of writing, that, however much preparation you do before you start writing, is finding out about your characters. And I think, before I started writing, I didn't really understand that phrase at all. But, as you're writing, you put them in situations and you start learning things about them. So I think, when I started off with Rick, I thought he was going to be, really squeaky clean. And he kind of is, but
Mm, but not.
he's cut a few corners and continues to do that. And I think that always is a bit surprising for me because I've always been kind of quite a good boy at school, that kind of thing. So to kind of start breaking the rules doesn't come naturally, but it is interesting and makes his character, um he's got a dark side to it, and that's certainly in terms of the overall series where I'm heading
Mm.
as we go forward.
I like the idea that he's not kind of this rogue cop breaking all the rules and on the take and all of this kind of thing. He's going with what he feels ethically is the right thing to do in different situations. So he very much, as though, I know we're saying he's kind of a good guy, but it's a good guy with an edge, shall we say?
Yeah, and I mean he is a totally good guy, and I couldn't write. I mean, there are series where Oliver Harris writes a series where
Mm.
his character is definitely rogue, completely rogue, and that's interesting to read. But I
Yeah,
couldn't write that. Rick he's a good guy, and he's aiming for justice. But that's not the justice from the criminal justice system. That is justice as he sees the world,
yeah.
and um, we were just discussing beforehand the end of this book, and the way it finishes is
Don't
Rick.
worry, we're not going to spoil it for you if you haven't read it
Yeah.
yet. We're going to be very careful.
Yeah, I mean the way it finishes is him, you know going for justice in the way he sees it.
Mm,
Michael Connolly writes about Harry Bosch, obviously, and he calls him the moral detective, and I really like that.
yeah.
And in my head, Rick is another moral detective, but it's subjectively moral.
We've got lots of hellos from people, so thank you everyone who's already joined.
Brilliant.
Kaz wants to know, if you get annoyed by anyone, have you ever killed them off in your book? Kaz, who's been rattling
uh,
your tree today?
um, there needs to be a vulnerability um, about every character. The possibility of them dying has to be there, because
Mm,
otherwise they're less interesting to read and to write about.
yeah.
So nobody, you know, um, one of the main characters in one of the books gets shot, and has a serious injury, and you never quite know when you read that whether is he going to make it or not, and that's what you need, because you want people not to know and to keep reading to find out, and obviously putting your main character in as much jeopardy as possible, and then one day, well, who knows, it might come on top for him as well.
One of the things that I always say when I'm drawn to a series in particular is I love it when I can't trust the author not to kill people. So you've really got that going for you, because I never really quite know what you're going to do, and there's always something that surprises me about how you do it. That for me is something that I really need to love a book as much as I've loved this one, because you have to have that can't trust the author. Oh, what are you going to do? What are they going to get up to? Are they going to play it safe this time? But does that mean that you're going to kill somebody off next time? It's always really interesting to me. And this ties in nicely actually with Sarah asking, how do you decide where to go with the plot? Because when you've got lots of things going on, have you ever thought, right, I'm going to kill this person off, and then gone, oh, actually, do you know what? That's not really going to work with where the story is going, and had to kind of change what you were writing to suit the new direction.
Well, it's a really interesting question, Sarah, and yes, the plot does change, and sometimes very significantly. Book two finished in one particular way, and um, I had some feedback on that from my editor, in fact. So Eve Seymour edits my books. She is crime writer in her own right, uh, and she said no, you can't end it like that. And it was brilliant, brilliant advice. And so I significantly changed the ending of book two, and that was
That's
interesting
interesting. Yeah.
to do. Um, so, I mean, when I set off, I have an overall kind of plot, but sometimes well, all the time. You know, what's interesting isn't writing that plot out, because that feels like you're doing your homework. What's interesting is starting off and seeing how the plot takes shape on the page. I had a brilliant piece of advice when I was doing my creative writing degree from my tutor, Joe Stretch. And he said, you want to surprise the reader on every page, if not in every paragraph. You know, there needs to be something for the reader in every sentence. You know, it's as that, you know, it might just be a nice word or a, you know, a bit of alliteration or whatever. But there needs to be something, you know, all the way down the page, and occasionally some big ones as well, some big,
Mm.
you know, some big Christmas presents there, you know, in the chapter.
We will go to your writing course and how you came to be a writer and where you're up to at the moment with the publication of your books. But I
Mm.
would like to go back to why you decided on police procedurals in the first place, because you're a really interesting man, and how different your life is now with the day-to-day things that you do compared to your working life, even though you are still working, obviously. I just find it all fascinating. So, shall we talk about your career in the police first?
Yeah. Um, so I left university and went on a long cycling trip, a 5 month cycling trip, and 5 months essentially trying to work out what the hell I was going to do when I came back. And I decided on the police. So I joined up, you know, it was my first proper job. I joined the Met, I then I went to Hendon for 5 months and then was posted. I worked at Kingston, Paddington, and Peckham. And then myself and my wife Sarah moved up to the Peak District, because I was lured by all the climbing in Wales and Scotland, wanted to be a bit closer. So I transferred to Greater Manchester Police and I worked at Stockport and finished as a detective inspector at Moss Side. Moss Side, as I'm sure most people have heard of Moss Side, is quite a hairy place to work. And Moss Side really finished me. And that was after being in the police 15 years. So when I joined the police, I thought that's what I was going to do. And for almost my entire career, I absolutely loved it. I mean, I
Mm,
really loved it. I used to get to work very early. And, you know, certainly when I was in uniform, I used to volunteer for all the overtime. So I loved it. And then pretty much overnight, it all came on top for me.
mm,
Um, and I went home one weekend. I was sent home, and I just folded totally. And so there I was on kind of Monday morning, wondering what I was going to do with the rest of my life. So we moved. It took a while, but we moved to a small holding right on the edge of the Peak District, and I started. And I know it's kind of mad looking back, but I started growing fruit and vegetables and keeping chickens and
mm,
bees. So spending quite a lot of time outside, but I needed a cerebral kick as well. So I started by writing a diary to try and understand what had happened to me and to try and move me forward.
mm,
And I'd write before breakfast and then again before dinner. And during the day, I'd go and work out on the small holding. And the diary kind of expanded and got longer, and became a memoir. And after a year of doing this, I had a book, you know, a book length memoir, 80,000 words. And I thought, well, I'll send it to some agents. So I sent it to 5 agents. Two of them phoned me up, said they really liked it. And I went to
mm,
meet both of them in London. And I thought, and one of them said, yeah, I'm gonna publish this memoir. I called it From Cop to Coppicer because I was spending so much time out with the trees and stuff. Um, and so I thought I'd done it. I thought I'd published a book. You know, all this, it's difficult to publish a book. I thought it was kind of rubbish. I'd done it, but it didn't turn out like that. After 6 months, the agent said, can't find a publisher. We had quite a lot of good feedback. Quercus really liked it. But they were a bit worried that weren't going to sell many copies. So the agent said, "Why don't you write a crime thriller? With your background, I think you'd write a good crime thriller." And I'd really enjoyed the writing, and I was getting better. The kind of combination of the dull physical repetitive work outside with the cerebral writing periods worked really well. It was a good
Mm.
mix. When I was outside, I was mulling my characters and my plots and stuff. So I thought, yeah. So I got out an envelope, that trusty envelope, wrote down the three things I know about the police, obviously, Nepal, because I've done a lot of climbing out there, and beekeeping. And I wrote a few notes, drew a few lines, and started writing. And a year later, I had the trail. Um, but the agent didn't like it.
Which is
So
unbelievable to me because I love it.
um, well, yeah, it's a very different book now. So he
Okay.
didn't like that first draft.
Mm.
And so I then tried with other agents for 3 or 4 years, and the penny dropped after a while that it wasn't really good enough. So I signed up and did a 3-year MA in creative writing at Manchester Met's Metropolitan University. And I was tutored by Joe Stretch, and that transformed my writing. If anybody's in any doubt about whether to do an MA, if you've got the time and the resources to do one, it was just brilliant. I mean, I'd like to do another one. It's brilliant in itself, as well as the what it does for your writing. So in terms of my writing, it went from, in relative to me, from kind of non-league to Champions League. It really was completely different. And I rewrote every word of the trail
Mm.
bar the title, which I really liked. Um, and so that's how I eventually got it out. It took me 10 years to finally find a publisher for it. And it had been a long journey, but a very interesting one.
We should talk about. You mentioned Eve Seymour, your editor.
Hmm.
You've done something different with the third book.
I have. So the first two books were published by Unbound. They're a hybrid publisher, and the way they work is by crowdfunding. So essentially, you have to pre-sell about 450, 500 copies before they'll commit to the publishing process. Because at that point, if you've sold all those copies in advance, so you actually literally take the money and promise people a book 18 months later, then there's no financial risk to them.
Mm.
And I thought this was, initially, this was a really good model. And so I ran around like a madman, getting everybody to buy my book in advance, which they did. I was very lucky. I've got a lot of friends from school and university, and also just neighbours and people in the village, and ended up accosting people who came to the door. So the postman from New Mills bought my book. What a very nice man. So I got the first one out with Unbound, and had a the publishing process with them was interesting. I got this brilliant editor, Eve Seymour. Initially, when I sent her my book, she read it and then sent it back with a 36-page document with things I might wish to consider. And I went to bed that night with my wife Sarah and said, "No way! I've been working on this for 9 years. I'm not doing any more changes." But got up next morning and then did and
Big
worked through this
changes,
long
yeah.
document for me. Yeah, and I think everything she suggested, and the book is substantially better because of her input. Um, and I had a brilliant copy editor, Mary Cheshire, a great cover designer, Mark Ecob, and the end, the end result, the trail is a lovely book physically, quality wise. it's lovely, and I've had a lot of compliments on that. When it came to marketing and promotion, didn't get so much support from Unbound, and which is disappointing. But everything considered, it was a very good experience with them.
Mm.
So I went back to them for number two and went through a very similar process. So Cold Dawn came out in August last year, and that again I had to pre-sell 450 copies or whatever, and I had the same
Which is
team.
not an easy thing, is it?
No, no, and you hope by then that a lot of people who've bought and read the first book are just going to automatically sign up,
Mm.
and a lot of them did, and that's brilliant because that's what you want. And I
Yeah.
had strangers supporting it, and that's in the first place, and that's brilliant. But yeah, I was very thankful to a lot of people,
Mm.
um, and so that was great. And so this year, I've had the manuscript for Cold Summer, and I was really excited about it. I mean, it's series books are really complicated because you have to keep in mind everything that's happened in the first two books. And it was fascinating to write. And of course you hope you're getting better. So I was delighted when I sent the manuscript off to John Mitchinson, head of Unbound, in November,
Mm.
and nervous when he sent back the email, but he loved it and said, James, your writing is really developing, and
Yeah.
yeah, we'll go with it. But November ticked into December, ticked into January, ticked into February, and he was struggling to get it through their board, and certainly in a timely fashion. And I was, um, I really wanted to get it out this year. I came to writing late, it is a second career, but I was 49, I think, when the Trail was published.
Mm.
And there's a lot of books left in me, in my head
Good.
at least. It's a 10-book series, and I can write a book a year, you know, no problem. So I was really keen to do it. So I pushed them, and they couldn't come to a decision. And so in the end, I made a very, very hard decision to leave.
Mm.
And then it was, oh my God, what have I done? How am I going to get Cold Summer published? Um, was I going to go back to agents? And that's a very, very long process. And to be honest, I wasn't that optimistic about it because the third part of a trilogy is going to take a pretty brave agent and a pretty brave publisher to go with that. I mean, I did send it out a bit, but I didn't hear. So then the other options are, well, independent publishers or self-publish it. And
Mm.
so there was no real option I really liked the look of. So what I did was and some people listening may have done this, but I set up my own imprint called Cambium Press. So Cambium is the layer in a tree just underneath the bark, the light green layer, and that's the layer where all the nutrients and water runs up and down the tree. So I thought that was a really nice way of kind of a really nice metaphor for bringing
Mm.
books to the market. So I set up the imprint, and then I hired the exact same team subcontracted to by Unbound. So the same editor, Eve Seymour, the same copy editor, Mary Cheshire, Mark Eckhobb, the cover designer, Andrew Chapman, the typesetter who has a company prepared to publish, same proofreader, same printers. They're printed at Clays, everybody, but just a different model. I had to pay up front for all these people, but it is the exact same team. So the end result, I'm pretty proud of it because it is identical, apart from the story, obviously, to the first two. It's identical dimensions, the cover is all in keeping, and that's been quite a feat, to bring that off. So yeah, it's been a massive, um, and another, massive learning curve. But very, very interesting to really understand, um, how a book gets to market and how it's distributed, as well. So, Nielsen's, Gardner's book distribution, and how that relates to Amazon, and the printers' clays. It's
Mm.
it's complicated.
It's quite a steep learning curve, isn't it, when you get started and realise
Yeah.
just how many things you need to know that you've never heard of, didn't know existed, and all of a sudden you've got all of this information and you're trying to work out how to get books from here to here in a way that makes everything smooth. And it's a lot when you first get started on the publishing process. But you seem really happy that you've done it.
Well, I'm delighted because I'm now in control, and that's when I was, December, January, February, when I was waiting the whole time to hear from Unbound. I was finding it very stressful,
Mm.
and I began to have some of the feelings that I'd had, when I left the police.
Yeah,
Um, and I knew that was a bad thing. That was a bad thing for me, and and the people around me as well. And so I knew a decision had to be made. Um, and I've had some pretty difficult days since then, but generally, where I sit now is it's been a
mm.
very good decision. I'm now in control. I'm in control of the timing. So, going forward, I am very, very hopeful that, number four will come out this time next year. And that will be the rhythm I get into, because I'm in control. Obviously, I'm totally indebted to this amazing team of people, because they've been, Andrew Chapman, the, from Prepared to Publish. I mean, there's nothing he doesn't know about, um, getting a book published, and I've had a lot of emails with him, and he's been brilliant.
I love that. One of the things you wanted to discuss was the titles.
Yeah. um, so my wife Sarah was kind of, asking me a few questions to tee me up for, this interview, last night, and she was saying, "You do realise, your last two books had cold in the title. What's going on there then?" So, yes, Cold Dawn, Cold Summer. So first of all, talking about Cold Summer. So it's set in Manchester. And it's always cold up here. It's got to be said. What they say about Hayfield, which is where I live, is it's 9 months rain and 3 months winter. But and of course the cliches about Manchester are is it's always raining, so it's always cold. Um, so it is set in the summer, but it is literally a cold summer.
Yeah.
Rick's cold. He's always cold, and so am I. So, when I did the little video ad for, this interview, I had my big puffer jacket on,
Yeah.
and the reason I've got that on is I do actually wear that at my computer quite a lot.
Yeah.
We live in, an old house. It's got these massive stone walls, and it's impossible to heat, and I'm cold quite a lot of the time. And I've got chilblains, and so the feelings of being cold just leach into my writing,
Yeah.
because feelings are what I've always found with my writing is, of course, there are elements of me and Rick Castle, and stories and ideas that I got when I was in the job, but none of that can be literally translated or literally just transcribed on the page. That always
Mm.
has to be, changed around a bit. But the feelings I've got can
Yeah.
be just go straight in the book, and that's what makes a book real, because I've had a lot of these feelings.
Yeah.
So that's the feeling of being cold. I'm always cold. And of course, I feel that kind of um, in terms of a genre, crime fiction is you can't. I mean, there is crime fiction in warm places,
Mm.
but I think cold places have an easy melancholy, and crime
Yeah.
fiction is melancholic. Uh, it's dark, and that's what the titles um, hopefully suggest.
Yeah, they definitely do. Malcolm's saying, well done, brave and inspirational. I do really love that you feel able to be quite open about, the difficulties that you went through, but now your life is in a completely different place. I mean, you have bees, you've got a small holding. Yes, you make time for writing, but you have got so much to do. And I love the idea of having the kind of the cerebral things, but also being outside a lot. I can't think of a healthier way of living, for mind and body.
Yeah, I am lucky, and it's worked out really well. I'm in a good place now,
Good.
and it took a while. It really did. I didn't really talk to anyone outside a very, very small social circle for 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
And I know it was difficult for, some of the people around me. Um, and it's taken a while to kind of get back to, who I feel I am. I mean, I'm not the same
Yeah.
person. We all change as
Yeah.
we get older. But where I am now is, 15, no, not 15. It's been 10 or 11, 12 years maybe since I left the police.
Mm.
And I now, although I wouldn't want to go through what I went through then again,
Yeah.
um, if I had my time again, I would just do exactly the same thing. I would join the police. It is a brilliant, brilliant career. It needs good people. It's fascinating. It's a unique career, and anybody I meet who's thinking about joining the police, or got a child who's thinking about joining, I think it's a brilliant thing because it's a
Mm.
career. Yes, there's a lot of awful kind of you know paperwork and red tape and stuff with it, but it's still a career that can take you in any direction, from detective to scuba diver to riot police, or whatever it is, and it is fascinating. Being that line between the state and society. It is interesting. And so where I am now, having had the career, my first career as a detective, my second career as a crime writer, I now just feel totally privileged to have had two careers, because most people
Mm.
just have one career. And I just think my life has been um, far more interesting having had two careers. And of course, I've got small holding thrown in as well. So,
Yeah.
the small holding does provide a whole other aspect to my life, which is very interesting. I mean, I'm very, very keen on apple trees, which nobody who I work with in the police can really ever understand whether I'm
Mm.
actually being straight up about it. But yeah, I am. I'm aiming to grow 100 varieties. I've got about 75 at the moment.
Wow.
And yeah, I do. I give talks on growing apple trees. In fact, I'm giving one on Thursday to Baslow Garden Society. I
Mm. I love
hope
that,
they
and
like crime fiction.
it's quite you found yourself in quite a sociable position. So you can kind of go into the house, close everything off if you need to, if you've got other things to do. But actually, you spend a lot of time selling books to people who are passing through, and you have people come and do visits and tours of your small holding. And you seem to have found a really good balance of having the privacy and the quiet that you need, but also lots of people to talk to.
Yeah, I mean, the there are some days when I don't really speak to anyone apart from Sarah, um, which is great. You know, she's she's number one uh, to talk to. But yeah, people do stop, and I have this sign on my gate which says eggs, honey, and crime fiction. So I do get two or three people a week knocking, and they think they're just going to come up and buy a few eggs, but usually I twist their arm, and they get a book, or sometimes they get all three: eggs, honey, and crime fiction. So that's been good fun. But yeah, you're right. I mean, I do small holding tours as well, um, and I'm trying to inspire um, children to, you know, grow up and want a garden, want to grow things. And I think particularly with the kind of fragility of our supply systems, growing your own is might be quite important quite soon.
Something that I used to do, we used to grow quite a lot of things, me and my dad. We moved house about 4 years ago, and for want of a nicer way of putting it, there are a lot of cats where we live now. So, not gone as far as, I think we'd have to build some cages and have really robust greenhouses, I think, to
Oh,
start again. But it's always raining. Does it ever stop in Manchester? I don't remember it being as rainy as it is lately. So, do you find?
um,
I know we're here to talk about books, but do you find the weather a help or a hindrance?
um, well, I'd much prefer to be in a rainy place than in a dry place.
True.
Seeing the news over the last year and see these really massively hot temperatures.
Mm.
Um, I'd much prefer to be where we are, which is wet. Um, and yeah, so they'll be carrying me out of this place in a box, I promise you. And I'm not going anywhere.
One of the things that I always find fascinating yet terrifying is the sight of Strangeways. Obviously, Strangeways features. I don't know how prevalent it is to have such a big prison, literally in the centre of a town or a city. I find we drive towards it. I mean, I'm in my 40s now, 41, and I still find the sight of it quite mesmerising and terrifying, but I do love to see it in books. If you're going to write a book about Manchester and crime in Manchester, you probably need a mention of Strangeways at some point.
Yeah, I mean, Strange Ways features. Can't quite remember if it features it in the trail, but certainly it's featured quite a lot in Cold Dawn and again in Cold Summer. And I mean,
I feel
Prisoners.
like it does feature slightly in the trail, but no, it's about 2 years since I read it. I can't be sure. Hmm. To go
I'll
back
be
and read
looking
it
that
and then
up
I'll
later.
message you about it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, prisons um, had a big impact on me when I was in the police. So,
Mm.
I went to prisons quite a lot. And, the first time I went, I just couldn't understand it, as there I was, a police officer, um, and I was being stripped of all my gear, not just my spray and baton and cuffs, but my mobile phone, my keys, just everything. They don't trust anybody. And so that had a really big impact. And we were getting, initially, I was in a burglary squad at Kingston. So we were going to prisons down there. Wandsworth, I went to quite a lot. And we were getting burglars out, putting them in the car, taking them back to the police station, interviewing them, driving them round a bit, getting them to point out burglaries that they'd done. It was really
Wow.
fascinating and really opened my eyes. But of course, prisons are, a vital part of the criminal justice system, and most people have never been inside one. Most people have never visited anybody there. And it's not surprising it has such an impact on you, a very law-abiding citizen with law-abiding friends and relatives. Um, so yeah, and I totally agree. It does seem mad that it's just there in the middle of Manchester. Um, so yeah,
I also didn't know that. I don't know how much you knew of this, how much was research, but I found it really interesting that in the book you talk about how many kind of not prison breaks as such there are, but um, people escaping from various situations. So maybe not kind of a category A prison, that would be far more. It would be quite rare, thankfully. But open prisons and other institutions like that, it's far more, it happens far more often than we would think. So how much
yeah,
of that is accurate from the book?
yeah. I mean, it's all everything is accurate. I mean, I did, um, I do quite a lot of research. I mean, obviously, writing crime fiction is a comfortable place for me because
Mm,
a lot of it is just totally natural. I don't have to think about, um, you know, the kind of processes of the criminal justice system or how a scene is going to unfold uh, procedurally. But still, there is a surprising amount of research, and that's quite interesting. So yeah, it's all factual stuff, which I've gleaned somehow.
how far into book four are you now? Have you started the actual writing of it yet? Look at me trying to
Uh,
just get any little crumbs for what's happening in the next one.
okay, so well, I'm quite a way ahead, got to say. So in my head, this is at least a 10-book series.
Mm,
I've written book four. So that's called Shot Out, working title Shot Out.
nice.
It's again set in Manchester, and it's Rick has a new job. So he's head of special investigations at South Manchester. So that gives me him a a much more roaming brief. So essentially, you can do kind of interesting, protracted, one-off investigations without doing earlys, lates, and nights, and have a caseload from
Mm,
division. Plus the discretion of the superintendent, so he has to do whatever the super wants. So basically, that makes Rick a bit more of a free agent.
mm,
So Shot Out starts with him getting assigned a traffic accident by the superintendent, which doesn't sound very interesting, but quickly develops.
no, I'm already
Um,
thinking, right, what are you going to do with this one?
yeah.
Because it's not going
So
to be any normal traffic accident, I can imagine. I'm not asking you to give us details of that, but I know kind of where your mind goes with things to a degree now.
mm,
So be interesting to see what you do with a traffic accident.
yeah, no, it's been. I mean, it is. I mean, there are different stages of a book or of writing a book, obviously. And, recently, the first 6 months of this year was all about the editing of Cold Summer. So back
Mm,
and forth with Eve the whole time. And then, with Mary, the copy editor. So it's been poring over the same words. But what is the most fantastic thing about writing is starting with a blank sheet of paper and, telling yourself the story. That is, and I'm about to do it, and I'm getting pretty excited about it because, what I really want to do over the next 4 or 5 months before I get into the editing of Shot Out is to write the next one. And I basically can't wait.
mm,
I've already started having a few little scribbles because it is, when you're in a good book, reading a good book, it's just so exciting, isn't it? You want to
mm,
go and read a bit more. You want to go, up to your room or whatever, and the hairs, when you hit a good moment, the hairs, or my hairs, when I'm reading a good book,
mm.
kind of the hairs go up on the back of my neck. And it's exactly the same when I'm writing. I look forward to the sessions at my computer, going up and telling myself a story, finding out what's going to happen. And yeah, and when I was in the job, I had some pretty hairy moments in the police, wandering around people's gardens looking for burglars in the middle of the night, and wondering if it was all going to come on top. And it was very, very exciting. But I can honestly say I have the same feelings sometimes when I'm writing. The hairs literally go up on the back of my neck,
Mm.
and I can't really. Well, I certainly wouldn't have believed that if you'd told me
Mm.
that when I was in the police. That writing about this stuff is going to be as exciting. And I said that just couldn't be. That's rubbish. But it's true for me.
When you do love going and talking to people, you've got, as you say, speaking appointments. What's the word I'm looking for? Anyway, you're going to do some events, so
Yeah.
keeping you busy. So where can people go and see you?
Well, I've got about 10 talks this month. So I'm actually talking at High Peak Bookshop in Buxton on I think it's uh, the 22nd. So next next
Wednesday.
yeah. So that's I think it's the same time, 7 to 8 o'clock. So people can catch me there. Um, and tomorrow I'm talking to um, Glossopdale WI. So yeah, so I'm looking forward to that. I'm going to be talking about the Long Roads publication and of course my new book. So yeah, so they're the ones off the top of my head. But yeah, I've got more dates, and if anybody is in a group of some kinds, club, book group, U3A, whatever, then I'll be delighted to come and give you a talk.
And you seem to be really enjoying it. Getting to
It's
go out and talk to more people. It must be quite different because obviously we've said that you do get to talk to different people at home through the day, and some days it's really quiet. It must be quite nice to go out and know that people are there just to hear you speak.
Yeah, I mean it's like now. I mean this is a very interesting thing to do, and I know we had a bit of an exchange in the lead up to this, Sam, and I was saying to you, what questions are you going to
And I
ask?
would
And
not tell you.
yeah, and thank goodness you didn't, because what's really interesting is being asked different questions, and that when I do talks, I have a set of 9
Yeah.
or 10 talks which cover my interests, the small holding, the bees, apples, my climbing, and of course writing. So
Mm.
I've got the same talks. I give the same talks. But what's really interesting is at the end when people ask questions. That's the bit that I love. That is, I really like just to do the questions. So this is like fantastic. An hour of you delving you know, into stuff. So yeah, no, I do like it.
Good. I know if somebody's really, really anxious beforehand, I will sit and plan something out with them. But we find it works better when it's far more natural. And I try not to go for anything tricky anyway. I don't want to, ask something that you wouldn't want to answer or that you wouldn't immediately have an answer to in your head. I
Mm,
just think it's nice when it's a conversation. So,
yeah,
but I do think it's good that you've got this kind of a template for what will work in different places, and that you're learning what will work where. I think that's a good thing. It's just
yeah,
otherwise, I suppose, if we planned it all out, you would know exactly what I was going to ask, and you would probably answer 5 questions that I was going to ask in the first one because it would be in your head. I've only ever done it once, and I said I wouldn't do it again unless somebody really needed to go through step by step. I do really just enjoy the chat. It's nice getting to discuss things. 10 books. Can we push you to consider 20,
yeah.
25 maybe?
uh, oh, what a lovely thing to say.
But do you
Well, I
think
mean,
you would
these.
just go with it if, people keep buying the books and you're enjoying writing them and you've got fresh material for each one, while the ideas are still fresh and you're enjoying it, would you consider going further than the 10?
Yeah, I mean, totally. I mean, kind of, I hear. Well, I'm listening to this great podcast series at the moment by Hattie Crisell, and she interviews loads of different writers. But I just listened to one on Barbara Trapido. And Barbara Trapido, well, she's well into her 80s when and she's still writing. And so, yeah, I mean, I think it'd be extraordinary if I was. To be honest, I'll be pretty happy if I'm just around when I when if, at 80. But yeah, I mean, a book a year feels quite achievable at the moment,
Mm,
and who knows? And I know when you really get into it, you a lot of writers have another series as well, and I have drafted. Well, I've got the first draft of a series about a um, a PI called Rockburn. So he used to be in the police, used to be a Manchester detective, and now he's a PI, and he rides a big motorbike.
mm,
Because I've never ridden a motorbike, and I thought that that was something I kind of was quite interested to find out a little bit about, and I think and I really like that book. I really like
mm,
it. So who knows if that might become a thing. Um, I think I just so love the writing process,
mm,
and it's nice to set some challenges with each new book. When you sit down, I don't just want to be doing the same thing. Um, so with cold summer, I made a one structural change, which is rather than having 2 points of view, I had 3 points of view.
yeah,
So in the first two books, I had Rick and Calix Coniston, and those 2 points of view continue in Cold Summer. But I thought I would add a third point of view. And I mean, what they say is that the more points of view you have in a book, the more complicated it is to write, and you shouldn't do that at the beginning. So I was mindful of that, but I wanted to, as I say, challenge myself. And so there is now a third point of view in the third book, and that's very interesting. You have to get the percentages right.
mm,
So they say that, your main character needs to be 55, 60% of the book or more, 65%. Then the next character 25-ish% and only maybe 10% number three, because of course you don't want to dilute people's interest and rooting for the main person. So that was interesting. So I'm not sure. And then jot out, I'll do something a bit
mm.
different as well. And that's why it was interesting to write, a completely different character in Rockburn. Um, so yeah, I've got all sorts of projects kind of uh,
Juggling
on the
lots
back
of
burner.
things, keeping you busy,
Yeah, yeah.
keeping you out from under Sarah's feet.
Well, she has her own career, and I mean, I think Sarah's always well, I want to say the elephant in the room, but that sounds very rude. She's like a gazelle in the room.
Absolutely.
Um, Sarah is kind of what's allowed me to do what I've done. So when I left the police and
Yeah.
was just in no man's land, she picked up the pieces. She decided we'd move to a small holding, and she then supported me, and has done ever since. There's no money in writing. There's no money in growing apple trees. She pays the bills, and I am massively indebted to her for that. But it kind of works. She tells me it works. She likes
Mm,
living, on the edge of the national park,
yeah.
and then at the weekends, we inspect the bees together.
Mm,
I make her clean out the chicken house. so that when she goes to all her, her big meetings and stuff, she has all these interesting stories. And so, yeah,
It
it seems to
works.
work. But yeah, I'm a lucky man.
You're a very lucky man, and we're indebted to Sarah as well because without her, then we wouldn't have things to read. So
Mm,
yeah, big fan of anything that keeps the Rick Castle series going.
brilliant.
Malcolm did ask about
Mm,
if your hobbies influence your plots. So we know that Rick keeps bees, as do
mm.
you. Anything else?
Um, I think the beekeeping is the main one. I mean, he's hasn't got much other time. I'm just
Yeah,
trying to think about Calix. So Calix is obviously, has this. He's very keen on animals, as he keeps telling people. I like dogs, and dogs like me. So that's been, very interesting. He's been a very interesting character to write and
yeah,
think about. Uh, and we don't have any dogs, but dogs live close to us. So
yeah,
I've somehow, again, these things kind of leach into your writing, really. And also, I work outside the small holding. I have a lot to do with squirrels and rodents and birds. So some of that has come into Calix's character because I'm familiar with them.
yeah,
When he does strange things with spiders and uh, and mice and stuff, that's it's easy for me to write. Not that I do strange things with spiders and
no,
mice, but I'm familiar with them. And I've really enjoyed exploring that aspect of his character and giving him this underside that is strange. Again, trying to make
yeah.
my writing stand out on the page. Surprise, surprise the reader.
Good job done. Absolutely. It's 8 o'clock. That hour has disappeared. Thank you to everyone who's joined us and asked questions and left comments. I have got a link to pop in for Cold Summer on your website, so I've just popped that into the chat. And thank you, most importantly, to James. Thank you, James, for coming to talk about Cold Summer and Rick Castle. And you all heard him. We're getting more books, so you can't go back on that. Thank you. I've absolutely loved having you, and I hope you come back next year for book 4.
It's a date, Sam. Thanks so much. Really appreciated it. I've really enjoyed this hour. It's absolutely flown for me as well. So
Do you
thank
want
you
to
very much.
remind everybody of the book covers and say a little bit about the books again?
So the trail, a missing person inquiry set in Nepal. Cold Dawn sees Rick go back there to pick up on unfinished business. And finally, the third part of the trilogy, Cold Summer. Nothing will be the same again.
Quite the understatement. Thank you so much, James.
Thanks, Sam.